Hello, World Wide Web. I'm going to try to run my Good to the Last Bite video live this week. See what happens. You know, change it up a little bit. So, welcome to the Last Bite Kitchen. We're just at that time of year where it's not quite spring vegetable time, but it is, you know, we're tired of the squash and all the other things. So when I went into Argus this morning, I saw a variety of different greens. Hi to everyone joining. I'm doing Good to the Last Bite live this week to see how it goes. And specifically, you know, there's spinach, and I saw some great Swiss chard too, which I'm assuming somebody's growing in a hoop house. But what I picked for this week's vegetable, I'll leave those off so there's no glare, is baby kale. Now, kale has such a mixed reputation, right? I mean, people who love it. And people who are tired of all of the kale hype are not sold on it, and they just want to say, oh, I'm never going to eat kale, it's gross and bitter. But I want to encourage you to try it in its baby form, especially when you can get it locally. It's so tender, it's so sweet. You've heard that kale is a superfood, and, you know, I'm not exactly sure who made that word up. It's kind of like the word foodie, which I don't like either, really. But really what that means is that it's very nutrient dense. It is packed with vitamin C, vitamin K, vitamin A, a lot of antioxidants, things that can help your body bind cholesterol and digest it. I mean, it really is fantastic for you. And of course, just the fiber. So the more you can work it into your diet, the better. And of course, we can saute it. We can put it into an omelet. I often put it in frittatas. But one of my favorite things to do with it, especially for people who think that they don't like kale, is to turn it into pesto. Now, my ancestors, my Italian ancestors, probably would roll over in their grave, right? Because the classic pesto from Liguria is basil. It's made with a mortar and pestle, ground pine nuts. But I'm actually here to tell you, in addition to suggest that you eat as much kale as possible, that pesto can be made with any green, any nut. It can have cheese, it cannot have cheese. I mean, the modern pesto. And the reason why I think it's important to know that is because you can get the fiber, you can get all the vitamins, and if you toss it with spaghetti squash or pasta, then, you know, the little bits of flavor of the kale that you might not like kind of are hidden by the other elements of the pesto. For me, I love the way that the greenness of this vegetable really kind of accents all of the other things. So because we're doing this live, I am going to run the food processor, but I just want to step you through how I would do this pesto. Now, yes, sometimes I do pesto by hand, but when I want to do a big batch, I'm going to use my food processor, and I'm going to start with garlic. Again, if you can get local garlic, fantastic. If you can't, you know, that's fine too, obviously, because garlic has a lot of health benefits, but it is worth it to look for local farmers. The flavor is so much stronger than what gets shipped over from China and even from California. If you can get it locally, try to. So what I like to do is put the nuts and the garlic in the food processor first and pulse it a few times so that to make a paste of those things that are harder to break up. And because a lot of my clients that I cook for have a nut allergy, I'm very accustomed to making pesto without pine nuts, which is the traditional, which pine nuts make a very silky, they have a beautiful characteristic to them, mouthfeel and flavor. I make it a lot of times with almonds, but for people who are allergic to tree nuts, I'd encourage you to try to make pesto with pumpkin seeds. I'm getting some bad shadow on here, but pumpkin seeds are, to me, very similar to pine nuts in a lot of the flavor notes. If you toast them first, They're really fantastic. Now, these are hard to find locally, but you can certainly save them from the fall. So always toast them before you put them in. So I'm actually going to put them in my food processor, and I'm going to put about, just so you know, and if anybody's interested, I can put the recipe below on the post, but I added 4 cloves of garlic because I really like it garlicky, and I'm actually adding about 1/3 cup of toasted pumpkin seeds. So the first thing I'm going to do is just pulse that 2 or 3 times. Okay, I lied, 4. Okay, and this is what I'm looking for. I just want it to be, I want the garlic to be broken up a little bit. You'll see there's still some chunks. That's okay. And then I layer in the baby kale. Now, if it's basil season and I have baby kale and basil, then I would add a little basil in too, but it's harder to find basil right now. So I'm just gonna go with the strength of this beautiful baby kale from Getz Farm. And I'm gonna put that right in there. And I'm gonna add a few more ingredients. I'm gonna add just a little bit of salt, especially for me. The cheese I'm gonna add later is gonna bring a lot of salt, so I don't wanna overdo it. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper and the juice of half of a lemon. Okay. And now I'm just gonna pulse this again. So notice I have not added cheese yet, and I have not added oil yet. So I'm gonna pulse this again. And I'm just pulsing it until the leaves are broken down. Because the kale is very tender, I don't need to take it all the way down to like a paste at this point, but see how that kale is broken down, and that was just with 3 little pulses because the baby kale is so tender. And then at this point, what I like to do is just stir in the other elements, because if you put the cheese in the food processor for a long time with these ingredients, it can kind of get gummy, and I'm not a big fan of that. Do I ever do it? Sure, but in this case, it's really nice just to add it separately. It does give you a little bit of a better product, I think. So I'm gonna add about 1/2 cup of cheese, a combination of Parmigiano Reggiano and Pecorino Romano, and about an equal amount of extra virgin olive oil. And then I'm just gonna stir until it becomes a paste. Now, sometimes, depending on how you're gonna use the pesto, you might add more or less oil. For today, I just wanted to show you one fun thing I'm gonna do with it later for myself for dinner. But, so maybe in total it's about 1/2 cup for how much I have. But I just want a spreadable paste. My phone keeps trying to go dark on me. Okay, and then I'm going to taste it. Always tasting is one of the most important parts of cooking, because you have to adjust seasonings. Don't overlook that. I'm gonna add another squeeze of lemon. I really like that. Again, I repeat it on all these videos, right? Seasoning with acid is so important. We often don't think of it. We often just season with salt and pepper as home cooks, but don't overlook that little bit of acid. You could also just use a touch of white vinegar. That would work too. So, could you just use this to dip a tortilla chip in? Fantastic. You have a tortilla chip. I'm getting mocked. These chips from Simply Gourmet Fresh that I got at Argus are really fantastic. They're flaky and delicious. But I want to show you one other thing. I'm going to grab something out of the toaster. So what I have here is a thick slice of Hamilton, a round Hamilton from Crust. It's so delicious. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just put a little bit of ricotta cheese right on the toast. Now I just had it in the toaster oven. If you want to grill it over an open flame, man, that would really amp up the flavor quite a lot. And I'm going to use the pesto twice. Again, if this is a toast for a meal, then be generous with it, especially because there's absolutely nothing to be concerned about. You've got the all the powerful vitamins from the kale. You have the nuts, calcium from the cheese, and all those great fatty acids that your body loves in extra virgin olive oil. So I'm going to take that. And then for the final thing, I have some vegetables that I grilled, some leftover vegetables. Although I do hate that word leftover because it makes you think that it's not special, but just because you cooked something the day before doesn't mean it's subpar. In fact, a lot of times it's even better the next day. So I just piled those on here right as well. Now this would be a case where, again, if I weren't live, I would have it all set up. I might dilute a little bit of the pesto with some oil so that I have a little bit of a drizzle on top. But here you go, just one way that you can use kale pesto. You could make this with spinach too, but the kale has a little bit of a bite that I love, and the baby kale really tempers that strong kale flavor that some people don't like. So I'd encourage you to get some baby kale where you can, turn it into pesto, toss it with some pasta, make a special toast with it, you know, even put a dollop of it on a fried egg in the morning. It's not only really fantastic in flavor, but it also is a powerhouse for you nutritionally. So thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please let me know. My email is allison@lastbitechef.com. Manja.